Hey everyone, after very popular demand, today I'll be taking you through an animation tutorial. In this episode, I'll be showing you how to create an animation loop. This is a technique popular in many forms of animated media, and is extremely simple to make. This video is aimed at beginners in animation, or those who simply would like to understand some of the process we go through as professionals. Now then, let's get started. In this video, I'll be using a software called Clip Studio Paint. I highly recommend it if you are planning on taking animation seriously, as it is what many studios use to create the anime you will watch and enjoy. However, I understand the pricing may be a factor, but no worries at all. There are plenty of cheaper alternatives such as Critter, which is completely free. Now that we're all prepared, let's get started. Firstly, I'm going to draw a rough guideline for how I want the animation to look. This step isn't necessary, but it's something I personally like to do to help visualize where I'm going. Next, we're going to begin drawing the base layer details such as the head and arms. Pretty much everything that will not be moving in this animation. So Goku's body will be one layer, which we will label A, whereas the hair and clothes will be on another layer that we will label B. Lastly, Goku's aura will be on layer C, which we will get to right at the end. Note, if your software does not allow for multiple animation layers and folders, just copy and paste Goku's base layer across to the next two frames. Once I am happy with Goku's face and arms, I will begin detailing the first frame of Goku's hair and clothes on animation layer B. For this first frame, try to use relatively neutral shapes. What I mean by this is to draw the spikes of Goku's hair and the creases in his clothes almost in a still position. We are going to set this animation to hold each frame for 2 frames. To do this in Clip Studio Paint, simply add a new frame 2 frames away from our first one. If you would like this animation to be quicker, place your new frame only 1 frame away. Frame 2. With this second frame, I want you to think about the hair and clothes going up or away from Goku's body. Draw the shapes as if they are being raised. The easiest way to do this will be looking at what your previous frame looked like via your onion skin and drawing the lines accordingly. Your onion skin essentially displays an overlapping ghost frame from previous and upcoming drawings on top of your current frame, so you can basically see backwards and forwards. My aim is to create a more calm aura, so I'm not going to make the lines move away from the body as much. With animation loops, if you are trying to achieve a more aggressive aura, or say an aggressive wind blowing at your character, you would have the lines move a greater distance from the character. Frame 3. For the third frame, you want to aim for the lines to be lower or closer to the character. To do this most effectively, I want you to paste the first frame with the hair and the body we drew after the third frame, making sure to keep this 1 frame gap in between each one. We do this so we can actually view what the first frame will be in our onion skin as well, as this will eventually help the whole looping effect of the animation. I'm aiming for Goku's bangs at the front of his hair to be going down, and the hair at the side to be coming closer to the middle of Goku's head. Similar to the hair, the clothes will be coming downward, closer to the center of Goku's body. Once I am happy with the 3 frames, I will paste them across the timeline to create a continuous loop, where if your animation doesn't allow this, just keep the 3 frames playing on a loop. Now, it's time for the aura. We are pretty much going to follow a similar principle we used for the hair and the clothes when creating the aura. On both sides of Goku, draw a line with multiple big spikes in it, like what you see on the screen right now. For our second frame, you want to draw the shapes of the spikes you drew in the last frame at a higher position, as if they are moving towards the sky. Remember to look at your onion skin for this one. To prepare for our next frame, draw some smaller spikes coming from the bottom. Now, for our third frame, do exactly the same as we did in the previous step. Using the onion skin again, draw each of the spikes at a higher position moving upward. To make sure we get this looping effect for the aura, paste the first frame after the third frame again, just like how we did with the hair and clothes. Make sure the spikes at the bottom look like they're going to move into the position the first frame is in. This will lock in that looping effect and make the aura look continuous. This step can be a bit tedious and sometimes take a while to get right. So please, if this is your first animation or first attempt at animation, don't try and be too much of a perfectionist in this step, as you will naturally just get better at this the more you learn. Once again, paste your aura frames across the timeline in order once you are done. Now we have officially completed the line art section of this animation. If you're happy with how your animation looks at this stage, it is totally fine to stop here. However, if you would like to colour your animation in the exact way we do in the anime industry, then continue watching. I actually chose to add a small detail to my Goku, adding the galactic patrol sign to his gi, following the loop we created for the hair and clothes, with the up frame 2 and the more downward thinking frame 3. Now we are officially in the Genga phase. In this phase, animators in the anime industry typically use blue lines to indicate where the shading will go, with red lines indicating where the highlights will be. Start by creating a new layer underneath our line art. For the cleanest and most effective results in this phase, make sure to clean up your line art. For the shading, I want you to try and imagine the lighting of the aura surrounding Goku, so the darker parts of the shading will naturally be closer to the middle of his body. It's entirely up to you how you want to design the shading. Some animators love to choose a more simplistic shading approach, as this allows us to spend more time on the movement of the character. However, in some specific cases, and much more commonly in modern anime, the shading will be much more complex and include interesting shapes to provide more depth to the character's face. Today, I'm choosing to go with a more simple shading style. Follow the same approach with the darker parts of the shading being closer to the middle for both the hair and the clothes too. Use a red pen for the highlights. This basically indicates where the light will be bouncing off of Goku's face. I think it's interesting as for a while highlights were criticised when it comes to art in Dragon Ball, but in my opinion it's entirely up to the shape of the light you want to use. Some parts of Dragon Ball Super have characters looking plastic or some say even covered in oil, but there are absolutely times where highlights elevate the character designs, like in certain instances in Dragon Ball Daima. Now, for probably the most rewarding part of our process, the colouring stage. Create a new layer underneath our shading and highlight lines. Using the bucket fill tool, make sure it is set to refer other layers and begin colouring in Goku. Do this for both the base layer with Goku's body and do the same on the hair and the clothes layer. Once you have completely coloured in each layer, turn off the layer with our Genga lines as we no longer need them. We have now officially coloured in our character. All that is left to do now is colour in our aura. Turn off our layers with Goku's base layer and also the layer of Goku's hair and clothes. Using the bucket fill tool, like before, make sure our fill is set to refer other layers. Now begin filling in our aura on each frame, making sure to create a new layer underneath our aura line art. This last step is entirely optional, but I'm adding a background to give this animation loop a more complete feel. Our animation is now done. As we are following a professional anime industry work pipeline, the next step will be compositing. Compositing basically involves adding post-production effects to bring the scene together and make it look more complete. Like our last step, this segment is completely optional but can absolutely elevate our work and give it more pop. For the compositing stage, I'll be using Adobe After Effects. However, other apps such as DaVinci Resolve, which is entirely free, are completely fine. For this compositing phase, I'll be aiming to use an approach that was used for the Dragon Ball Super Tournament of Power arc. Our first step with compositing will be to duplicate our animation layer twice. Search for Gaussian blur in our effects folder on the side and apply this to both new layers. On our top layer, set the level of blurriness to 8. On our middle layer, set the blurriness to 12. Now I want you to set the blending mode of the top layer to lighter colour. On the middle layer, set the blending mode to soft light. To finish this step up, set the opacity of the top layer to around 40% and set the opacity of the middle layer to around 50%. This should give you a more intense and glowy look to your animation. To go the extra mile, you can create a new shape layer, placing it in the middle of the aura. Set the colour to black and set the roundness super high, like to 2000, to create a circle. Then use Gaussian blur, turning off repeat edge pixels, then set the blurriness to 400. Set the blending mode to overlay, and then set the opacity to 30%. Create a new shape layer, but this time keep it rectangular. Place it at the bottom of the frame and set it to the same colour as the aura. Same as before, apply Gaussian blur to a high amount such as 300. Turn off repeat edge pixels and now set the blending mode to add. Turn down the opacity to a low 20%. And with that, we are now completely finished. I hope you enjoyed this animation tutorial. It's something I've been meaning to get around to for a while now. I plan on doing multiple episodes, with the next being a focus on how to animate classic Dragon Ball fight scenes. If you would like to study this exact project file, I have uploaded it to my master vault, which you can access by becoming a YouTube member or joining the team on Patreon. Subscribing to my Sakuga artist tier will give you direct access to this project file, alongside 3 other animation files to look into, including fight sequences from the third part of Future Gohan's Last Stand, as well as Cell's Kaioken power-up from my recent Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta vs Cell animation. Alongside these project files, you will also have access to HD wallpapers of some of my best artwork, including intense close-ups, impact frames, and even thumbnails to my biggest videos. Every month I plan on dropping more content into this master vault, so make sure to join to never miss an upload. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please consider liking, commenting down below what you thought of it. If you are watching on mobile, please consider hyping the video, as this greatly helps the channel. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.